Alrighty. Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Trundle Domination and I'm here with another kind of different style from my normal gameplay and commentaries. Due to the suggestion of one of my viewers, I'm going to do a discussion video about the role of jungle in League of Legends and how the recent changes in patch 12.20, or sorry, 13.20 are going to affect the role. Have affected the role. I'm recording this after the fact, but I wrote the script before, so there's going to be some times where I'm kind of back and forth, just so you know. Um, so in general, I have many questions that I want to address in this video, namely, what is the purpose of jungle? Why is jungle so powerful? How do the current changes affect the role? And what might jungle look like in the future? So, before we get into it, please make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more analysis and discussion videos such as this one. I love predicting changes, and as a fellow game designer in the past, I love theory crafting solutions to existing problems. Anyways, let's get right into it. Also, just so you know, this background footage is just one of my recent games I played in solo queue. So this is like D1 low masters elo, but just something kind of to put on in the background. So just some stuff to watch while we're doing our discussion. Alrighty, now let's hop right into it. So, in my opinion, the purpose of jungle in general is to act as a secondary, more combat-oriented support for the team. This goal stems from jungle's ability to impact the whole map, to set up plays, and give gold and stat bonuses to allies. The primary goal of jungle is to get the team ahead, either through ganks, objectives, or just general support, like counter ganking, wave control, or invades. Many people would ask then, what about carry junglers, and how would you classify them as a support? Well, the easy answer is saying that carrying is a type of support in of itself. Killing the fed enemies before they can kill your team is a great answer to many team comps. After all, the best form of CC is the gray screen, as you're unable to, play the game. So in this way, carry junglers act almost like anti-carries in a lot of ways. If the enemy jungler is ahead, sometimes the best thing that you're going to be able to do is kind of follow them around and make sure that they can't gank your team, and to try to basically put them behind. Throughout the history of League of Legends, it's basically been the same. Besides maybe the skirmish heavy meta and like kind of season 6 and 7, there was a lot of like Trundles and old Udyrs that would mostly focus on fighting in the jungle as their primary form of impacting matches. But besides that, jungle has mostly remained the same, where those kind of hyper carry and supportive and tank engaged junglers are really common. So now moving to the next question. Why is jungle so impactful and powerful for carrying games? Well, I think jungle is so powerful in general because of three main factors. They have a plethora of win conditions, they have map-wide combat pressure, and they have complete objective and objective fight control. Some other win conditions include getting any lane ahead, getting themselves ahead, spam ganking to put an enemy behind, counter jungling to put the enemy jungler behind, power farming to hit a power spike, stacking objectives, playing around side lane pressure, playing for team fights, playing for heralds, etc. The sheer number of ways to win in this role makes it the single best role for carrying, if done correctly. The trade-off here is that when someone who doesn't know how to play jungle properly is put in the role, they often completely troll the match and make it unwinnable because there are too many options to consider when deciding what win conditions to pursue. This makes jungle very skewed towards players who can game plan and have really good game knowledge, and especially bad for newer players who will likely be focused on farming their own camps rather than impacting lanes or impacting the enemy jungle. The second huge power that jungle has that makes them so good at carrying games is the essentially effectively map-wide combat pressure. I've seen countless laning guides as I've played and studied every role in the game that say something along the lines of, when you're looking for fights, you should always be aware of where the enemy jungler is. And that goes for literally every single lane, all the time, because the jungler can virtually be anywhere at any point in time. This type of mental pressure is game-winning if you happen to be in the right place at the right time at any point during the match, because the laner has to respect what you can do and effectively just not play the game if they don't want the chance to potentially lose the fight and lose the match off of snowballing. So the last major impact that jungle has is their control of objectives and objective fights in general. Being able to secure epic monsters, which are game-winning all on their own, is an incredible responsibility that makes jungle incredibly impactful. In addition, this adds to the unplayability of the role for newer players, as they may not know how Smite works and how the objectives can get stolen. These three factors make jungle incredibly powerful just as a role, without even considering individual champion strengths or player strengths within the role. On its own, jungle just generally has too much agency over any given match. Because of this, the Riot team, I believe spearheaded by Freak, decided to give a nerfed jungle agency with a boatload of changes in 13.20. I want to very briefly go over these changes just to contextualize what they addressed when trying to fix the role. In total, they made it harder to clear post level 3, they made dragons less impactful, they made less gold come from objectives, they made it harder for laners to take camps, they nerfed the smite damage overall, they reduced pet jungle damage, and they buffed all Doran's items. The aims of these changes were to lower the jungle's ability to farm and gank, making it harder to gank lane super early, and to make individual objectives less impactful in general. I think these changes were overall a good start, but they kind of hit the wrong target. They were taking a blow to the agency of ganking and farming, but doing one or the other is still very viable. I expected and I saw that these changes heavily polarized the jungle in general, making ganking junglers gank even more, and making farming junglers power farm even more, just to keep up with the same item spikes as before. We saw this easily with junglers like Zac, who's a spam ganker, and junglers like Fiddle, who's a spam clearer, both rise in popularity and in win rate severely after these jungle changes. So we can immediately see that polarization even just a few days after the patch was released. This polarization is going to have heavy consequences, and already has had heavy consequences, for the jungle meta in general, as good all-around junglers like Udyr, Rek'Sai, and Nocturne might struggle to see consistent results. They kind of missed the nail on the head by only addressing one area of power for junglers, namely the map-wide combat pressure. Junglers still have agency over all epic monsters, and they still have many viable win conditions for every single match. Additionally, they did nothing to lower the skill floor of jungle for newer players, making it effectively just as polarizing as before, and I would argue even more polarizing now. So, now that I've covered the strengths and the changes of jungle, I want to get into predictions and my personal expectations. Starting first with what I think they're going to do, what I think the changes that will come soon will be. Sorry, I can't English today. So this isn't like what I want them to happen or my suggestions, but this is what I think they're going to have to do to balance out jungle in the near future. I think they're going to have to make lanes harder to gank, as they've already mentioned doing that in the past, to try to adapt to the spam gank meta that I'm predicting. It kind of has come true. I think it's going to get worse, though. I think they're going to have to buff jungle XP or jungle gold to compensate for the spam gankers and the power farmers. They may also, I think, have to buff counter jungling to give other options of play besides AFK farming or spam ganking. I think that all these changes might do a little bit better to try and balance it out, but either way they have to be really careful and do kind of minimal changes in a lot of those regards. Because if they swing it too far one way, then it's going to be only power clearers or only spam gankers in the jungle meta. So now I want to move into my personal wishes for the role and what I want to have happen to hopefully balance how much impact jungle has. I think that making lanes harder to gank is a good change to lower jungle pressure, because it means that more resources, namely time, will have to be committed in order to achieve the same gank results. However, they need to do this in a way so that farming junglers can't just get levels ahead due to never ganking, because then the incentive to power farm will be way too high. As I kind of talked about earlier, it's kind of got to be a balance. Next, I agree that jungle shouldn't be a combat spell. As they showed with their changes, they agree with me, but something else then needs to be added to increase skirmish pressure so that there's another opportunity for jungle to impact the game and impact the map besides just farming or just ganking. I think this can be done in a few ways. I was thinking maybe like a third buff, like a new thing that they could add. Maybe they would grant like a shield. Maybe it would grant just extra stats. Um, but it would be kind of hard to balance that as well. Another idea I had was maybe higher experience on a full clear to impact combat pressure. Because someone who takes 3 camps and someone who takes 5 camps are going to be the same level, barring any minion XP they may have soaked up. So I think that maybe even making it to where off 3 camps you stay level 3, but off of 5 camps you get level 4, it might make it a lot easier for junglers like Fiddle and Evelynn to kind of skirmish better against your Udyrs, your Trundles, your Hecarons. So, the last change that I hope and I want them to make would be to the objective securing system. I think that right now jungle just has too much control over whether or not objectives are attained, and I think that there are a few propositions in general that could make this much easier for the team to have pressure over rather than just one individual player. Keep in mind that these are all just ideas and would require nuance in their own execution. So firstly, I think that the most practical and interesting solution would be to make objectives a point control resource. If you don't know what this is, it's pretty standard in some other games. Basically, whoever is able to stand in the pit for the longest time will secure the objective, whoever's team. Obviously, this would have to be balanced in such a way that poke champs and ADCs won't have to face check bruisers and assassins, but if it could be implemented, it would allow for some really interesting dynamics when it comes to objective fighting. A second solution might be to give all teammates access to an epic monster specific smite when the objective is started. So when your team hits the objective, all of you guys may be on a new button, you would get access to a smite that would allow you to take the objective, the epic monster objective. I think this would be really hard to balance, especially with the amount of damage that it would do. And I don't love it in general because it would take away from individual agency of players during a fight, but it would put jungle on even footing for objectives. Another approach, and I think my personal favorite, would be kind of a total domination strategy, where any team that assists in the kill of the objective would receive the buff for themselves. Sorry, any player, not any team. That way, the emphasis would be to force enemies away from the objective, and would allow them to not allow them to freely get the buff for themselves. This is my favorite solution because I think it would force teams to play in a more coordinated and create a zone of pressure around the objective that would reduce the pressure on the losing team, because an Ezreal who could just Q once and get a free Baron buff would allow much more anti-siege pressure against the entire team of Baron buffs on the other side. So this would also reduce the priority on Baron, because if an Ezreal is alive, he can just ult on top of the Baron and guaranteed get the buff for himself. I think that this solution would be really interesting, so it would create just a basically all or nothing Baron take, where if you managed to hit the buff and stay alive, you'd gain the buff for yourself. Now, let's just clarify, if Ezreal assists on the Baron with his R, his whole team doesn't get the buff, but just he would. And I think that would allow for a lot more intricate gameplay around the objective. And I think that with dragons, it would have to work differently, and Rift Heralds obviously too. But I think it's something to consider for maybe how those buffs work too. Either way, I think that all of these objective secure methods could be potentially implemented well and make jungle less impactful at securing every single objective, but either way it's going to take some work and innovation with any of the strategies. I don't expect that jungle will change drastically in the future. I think that the basis of the role and its strengths will have to remain for the most part even with future changes. I expect that the role will stabilize, however, and become hopefully just as impactful, if not slightly more, as other roles, when changes to ganking and objective control eventually do come around. But anyway, those are my thoughts on jungle. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below, particularly about the methods of objective control. I would love to hear some thoughts about, because those are obviously only a few ideas. I mean, there's a lot of other ways that we could do it, and that also might be equally as effective. So please let me know what you think down below. And thank you for watching. And if you'd like to see any other analysis of other roles, either past, present, or future, please make sure to like and subscribe and leave those down in the comments. Have a great day. Thank you.